So it is a distinct honor to have Lynn Moroney with us tonight. Lynn is from Oklahoma City. She has been a planetarium director in Oklahoma City. She has been a special projects director for the Oklahoma City Museum of the Arts. For the last 3.5 years, she has been a freelance writer and storyteller. And she is the grandmother of Michael Thomas Finn Moroney. Yeah.
If I talk like this, can you hear me? Is this, listen. Is that one of the, how about it? Can you hear this, or do I really need a microphone? Can you hear it? Well, I think I'm going to try to not use a mic if it's at all possible. And if it gets bad, just raise your hand and I will come over and snap on the microphone. Is that a problem for you that I don't have on? You need it for you. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Kids, it's called Following Directions. Okay, hold on. I gotta put this around the thing here. Hold on. So I'll kind of stay over here. Is that better? Does that help you? I come from Oklahoma, and I was fortunate enough to come into your state for the first time a year ago in the fall. Came back again, and I want you to know I was just telling him that you always get a little bit lonely after you go back, having gone out and you meet all these people and you go back home and it's, you know, you gotta do a load of wash and just kind of be a person, you know. And so it's always difficult, but it's going to be hard Saturday. I really enjoy your community, and people have taken me around and taken me for drives to see part of your city. I really enjoy that. I want to tell some stories tonight, but before I do that, I want to talk to you just briefly about the importance of stories for families. It is in the tradition of storytellers to have a kind of a niche of storytelling. Family folklore is not my niche, but I'm going to leave a name with the powers that be and hope that one day you will bring in a storyteller whose specialty is family folklore, because I am here to tell you that you do not need to go to a library to have a wonderful, wonderful story. Your own families have them. The tradition of storytelling is that in the old days, when you wanted to know about the world, you went to the storyteller, and the storyteller explained the world. It was the storyteller in the community who passed on the traditions, the value system, and the beliefs of a community. That's true even today. Like it or not, we have a national storyteller. For the most part, it's that little box that's in your house. And that little box is passing on the value system and the belief system. And that little box is passing on the traditions. And we have only to look at our collective stories to find out, you know, what kind of a value system we've got going. How many people in your own families remember? Do you have the one person in your family that's kind of the family storyteller? Yeah. Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so. Now they're gone. And you didn't write down the stories, and they didn't write down the family stories, and you were a kid, and then you thought, oh, if I go to that family reunion and have to listen to Uncle so-and-so tell that story one more time, and now you wish you had those stories. I heard Alex Haley, the author of Roots, say one time, every time an old person dies, it's like burning a library. And that's true. Every family has got a folk tale. You've got a hero story. You've got a love story. Some families have ghost stories. You have a hero tale. All of that is in your own family, and I really would encourage you to do that. Right now, if you are sitting with your kids, are you? If you are, turn to your child right this minute. I'm going to give you a 1-minute story. If you're not, just turn to the person next to you and tell the person next to you, I hope it's your child, about one time when they did something that really made you proud of them. Right now. You got 30 seconds. And if not, just brag on your kids. Yeah, I'm speaking now. I'm doing a work exercise.
I thought this lady's really.
Yeah, I'm doing a thing.
Great picture. You're really letting loose and just smile.
Thank you. Okay, we'll keep it short. I'm going to go ahead and use this mic. Keep it real short. Did you just tell a story? Maybe you told a story just then and your son or daughter did not even know that they had done something that made you very proud of them. And if they hadn't, maybe once a week you could remember to tell them a story about something they do that makes you proud. How many of you know the little tiny worry dolls that we see in the boxes? The first storytelling workshop I ever attended was given by a woman who traveled around the world for UNICEF collecting stories and all the little things that go with stories. And she said that in Guatemala, one of the things they do with those dolls is that they take the dolls out of the box right before the children go to bed. And they pick out a boy doll for one of the boys. And the mother says, well, today, Juanito was supposed to help me gather firewood, but he got busy and he went out to play and he didn't help the way he can. But tomorrow he's going to do a better job. And they put the little boy doll in the box. And then they take out a little girl doll and they'll say, well, perhaps Maria was going to do better in school, but she forgot. So tomorrow she'll do a better job. And you put the dolls in. And the family ends up absolving one another. And they all go to bed and they put the lid on the worry dolls. And everyone goes to sleep with a good night's sleep, to get up the next day to do better. And there's an example of how families can tell stories. If you will tell stories at a time in our society when there is so little continuity for children. Okay, kids. Let's get it real still. They know the rules here. Let's get it real still. At a time when there's very little continuity, a story is one of the healthiest things you can do for your children. You can tell the stories of the grandfather and the grandmothers, the mothers and the fathers, the children, the aunts and the uncles. You can even do that in the most dysfunctional family. One of the big problems in a dysfunctional family is that those of us from dysfunctional families don't have a story because we don't have that continuity. Create one. And I always tell the kids, especially working with kids that are having a little bit of a problem, you know, you're handed your characters and setting, and you are handed the conflict. But no matter what, you get to make up your own ending to your own story. And you should remind your children of that, to create their own ending. Tell your children stories. It's good to read to them, but it's also good to tell them. Play story games. We've been doing the things up here just as a game as you're going along with your kids. I do this now, and I got grown daughters. And we will argue about these things. We put two words together just to make a picture. Not a real story, a word picture. What does a glass princess look like? Everybody in this room is seeing glass princess. No two people are seeing the same thing. What happens when you hear a story is you create pictures in your imagination. And it works like this. Once upon a time, there was a queen who walked back and forth in the tower of the castle, and she was carrying her child. And all the while the queen was carrying that child, that baby girl would not stop crying. And so it was that the queen walked back and forth carrying, listening to the cries of that baby, when the queen looked out of the window, and there in the distance she saw blackbirds flying by. And then she looked down at her baby and said, "Ah, I wish you were a blackbird, and I wish you would fly out of this tower so that I would not have to hear you cry." And with that, the baby girl turned into a blackbird and flew out the window. Now I'm going to stop the story there. If you want to finish that story, it's in a collection of Grimm's fairy tales. It's sometimes called The Raven, and it's sometimes called The Glass Mountain. But I want to know something. What color was the queen's dress? What did you see? A black dress. What color was the queen's dress? Black. Didn't see one? What color? Come on, look at her. See her walking around. What color was her dress? Red dress. What color was her dress? Red dress. Blue. Red. Green dress. How many of you had crowns on the queen's head? How many of you just had like a hat or something beside a crown? Had a hat. Yeah. What shape was the window that she looked out of? Square one. Tall, thin one? Rectangle? We got a square, we got a rectangle. What shape was it? Flat on the bottom and kind of like this? Does that one win? How many of us had these? Yeah. Yeah. When the baby girl turned into a blackbird, how many of you had her just immediately turn into a blackbird? Just zap, blackbird. How many of you kind of had her slowly turn into a blackbird? A nose and a wing and a... You know, the world is separated by those who have, you know, there's half the world, you know, there are cat people and dog people. Well, there are that. Did you see what was happening to you when you heard the story? When you are listening to a story, you create pictures. It's very healthy to do that. When you're telling your children stories about things you did as kids, they picture that. That's the kind of continuity. Even if you have, those of us who have adult children, we'll be told, tell stories to your adult. Tell them to the adult children, too, so that they can have this sense of going on and continuity. Tell them anything. Tell them the first time you got your first kiss, if you can remember. And it used to be that Grandma can tell them the first long dress, but now everybody gets long dresses, so it doesn't count. Tell them about the first time you took the keys to the car and you got to drive, and you didn't have permission. Ha-ha. Right now, turn to the person next to you, and it's time for a scary story. Not scary, a scary story. Everybody's got a little scar someplace. Turn to the person next to you. I'll give you 1 minute. Tell them how you got it. How'd you get that scar? I don't want to hear about your operation. just a little scar. We don't want to hear about your operation. Okay. And some of you thought you weren't storytellers. What is this? Sometimes people will say, oh, I don't know any stories, I can't tell any stories, but they can tell them. I think I'm going to start telling some stories now, and I'm going to tell you a story that happened to a friend of mine. It's part of her family folklore now. And kids, I need you to be very still because this is going to be a story you're going to want to remember. And mostly I tell star lore, but I'm going to tell this one story that's a family story, although it's not my family. I have a friend. Her name is Kitty Perdue. She's a 4th grade teacher in Oklahoma. When Kitty was a little girl, she lived in West Virginia. They were very poor. She lived with her grandmother, lived with them, and she said that she loved her grandmother, that she loved to sit on her grandmother's lap or sit up close and smell her grandmother. And she said her grandmother had beautiful white hair, and when Kitty was a little girl, she got to brush her grandmother's hair, long white hair. And then her grandmother would put that hair up in a bun on the back of her head, but at night she'd take it down. And Kitty says she can always remember seeing the back of her grandmother's neck. Okay, girls, I want you to sit there now. Okay. And that was a necklace, and on that necklace was a locket. The locket was 2 pieces of glass pressed together. And inside the glass was a lock of hair that had belonged to Kitty's grandmother's grandmother. And I've forgotten the exact name of those, but particularly in the South, when someone died, they would take a lock of hair, press it in glass, and make either a brooch or a necklace. So that was Kitty's great-grandmother's lock of hair. When Kitty's grandmother died, it was a very sad day for her because she loved her grandmother so, but the grandmother had left that necklace to Kitty. Kitty was only 14, and her mother said, you have to wait till you're 18. And when you're 18 and really can take care of the necklace, we'll give it to you. And on her 18th birthday, she was given that necklace. She put it on, and she said that she wore it almost every day. She wore out the little clasp that held it onto the chain. She would take it in and try to have it cleaned, and the jewelers would clean the outside, the little gold frame, but they'd say, lady, I can't take this apart. I'm afraid if I take it apart, I could never get it back together again. She wore out other pieces of it, would have it repaired, and the only time she did not wear this little locket of her great-great-grandmother's was when she was wearing silver jewelry, because it was gold. Now, one time at Christmas, they had a school Christmas party, and that night Kitty wore silver jewelry. And that night she left her locket at home, went to the school party, came back home, her front door was open. Someone had come into her house during the party, and they had taken a TV, a VCR, and a few other things, and had taken her box of jewelry. And her box of jewelry was like most of our boxes of jewelry, a few sentimental pieces and mostly just costume jewelry, and in the box was the locket. She began to go through all the things that we go through when we begin to grieve. At first, she couldn't believe it. It must not have been in the box. Surely it wasn't lost. She must have put it somewhere else. She looked all over the house. She looked in every corner. Maybe it was here, maybe it was there, but at some point she knew it was gone. And then she went through the angry stage, and she said she went around for weekends, for about 6 to 8 weeks. She'd go to every garage sale that was around. She went to all the pawn shops looking to see if somebody might have her jewelry and that necklace and try to sell it. The police had said to her, "Lady, you're never going to get that back. That's gone. They've either thrown it away or they've given it away. You're never going to find it again." And then after that, she was still angry, and she said she thought about that necklace, and she'd think to herself, "I hope that whoever has my necklace is having bad luck. I just hope that if they put that necklace on, nothing wonderful happens to them." And she kind of went through that phase. And all through the summer, slowly, 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 she dealt with the reality that the necklace was gone. That fall, summer school began, and things went on as usual. Sometime in the fall, a voice woke her up while she was sleeping. And the voice in her dream or in her ear, she does not know which, said, "Look at the foot of the bed." It was loud enough that it made her wake up, and she got up, turned on the light, looked at the foot of the bed, and her necklace was there. Now that's the story. And I have the same questions that you probably have, so I'll tell you the questions that we all ask her. We said, "Well, Kitty, first of all, did you really hear a voice, or did you just think you hear it?" And she said, "I don't know." We said, "Well, maybe it was just down there all the time and you just didn't see it." And she said she had vacuumed many times. We said, "Well, maybe it was just kind of caught up in the bedclothes." Well, no, she had changed sheets. She had changed bed linens many times. Well, maybe it was just there all the time and you were so stressed out you didn't see it. She said she thought that was unlikely. We don't know what the mystery of that, nobody knows. But each year when you're in the fourth grade, she will tell you that story. And the kids come up to her, and she tells the same story every year, the same way I just told it to you, with the same ending. She found the necklace, and I knew she found it because I remember seeing it again with her. I remember when she lost it. And the kids will come up and they'll say, Miss Perdue, I'm in the fourth grade this year. Are you going to tell us the story about when the angel floated in your room and brought you your necklace back?" And she says yes. Or some other kid will come up and say, Miss Perdue, will you tell the story about that time that monster came in and said, "Here's your old necklace, I don't want it anyway." They have made up so many solutions to that story because they go home and tell their brothers and sisters. I know the kids have been doing that this week. Have you been getting the scary stories this week? Yeah, some of the parents come up, the kids in the first grade come up and say, "Tell us that one about," and it's not one I usually tell the babies, but their big brothers and big sisters are telling them. That's how stories work. Stories have a meaning, and they have an intrigue, and the joy of a story is that while you're listening to the story, you live in the present, and you're not fretful about the past or regretful, and you're not worried about the future. You're just there hearing the story. And if you can tell or hear a story about a loved one, it's much, much better. And I just hope that we've been telling stories this week, but I don't know your children's stories, and I don't know your stories about your town. Only you know them. Please tell them. Well, let's tell a couple of more stories here. Once a man walked into the forest. He was a hunter, and he caught a beautiful bird. It was beautiful. And when he caught that bird, immediately the bird began to protest and say, "You should set me free. I'm a bird. I should fly and be free." And the man said, "Oh, no, you're much too beautiful. I will keep you. You're too beautiful to set free." And he thought, when he heard how the bird was protesting, the man thought to himself, I didn't know birds were so sensitive. And he took the bird to his cottage, and he took the bird inside the cottage, and he placed the bird in a beautiful golden cage by a window, so that the bird would have lots of sunshine and water and a beautiful cage. And as he shut the door on the cage, the bird said to the man, well, if you won't set me free, will you at least go back and tell my relatives that I'm still alive? And the man said, that I'll do for you. And he went back to the place in the forest where he had found the bird. And he called up to all the other birds, and he said, birds of the forest, I've found your cousin. Your cousin is safe. Your cousin lives in a beautiful golden cage in my cottage. He was explaining what he had done with the bird, and when he did, one of the birds fell out of one of the branches, dead to the forest floor. Dead. And the man looked at the little dead bird, and he thought to himself, I didn't know birds were so sensitive. And he went on back to his cottage. And when he went inside, the little bird said, did you tell them? Did you tell them that I was safe? And the man said, oh, yes, I did. But while I was explaining that you are perfectly safe here with sunshine and a golden cage and water to drink, one of your uncles fell dead out of the forest trees onto the forest floor. And when the little bird heard that, the little bird itself fell dead to the bottom of the bird cage. The man thought, I had no idea that birds were so sensitive. And he went over and he picked up that little bird, and he carried that little bird over and placed the little bird on the windowsill. And with that, the little bird got up, flew away, and said, I knew one of my relatives would have good advice. Cute story. Stories are important to us. This is a story. They opened up the Holocaust Museum. Was today the opening? I think it was. And this is a story that comes from the Hebrew tradition. It's a beautiful story. It seemed that there was a small village, and many generations ago, the people in the village got word that their enemies were coming and that they would slay their enemy. The enemies were coming to slay them. They were all going to die. They went to the rabbi. They didn't know what to do, but the whole village and the rabbi went out into the forest to a special place, and they built a fire, and they all said a special prayer. And because they did that, the enemy never came to the village, and they were spared. Generations went by, and there was another time, this same village, in which word once again came that they were about to be vanquished. And they remembered what had happened before, and so once again they all went to the forest, but this time they couldn't find the magic place. They just knew to go to the forest, build a fire, and say the prayer. And again they were spared. Many years passed again. The same thing happened. The people did not know what to do, and this time there was no time to build a fire. They didn't know the special place. There was no time to build a fire, so they just went into the forest and said the prayer, and they were spared. Again, more years passed, another time, and there was no time to go into the forest, and this time they only had time to say the prayer. And they did, and they were spared. And the very last time it happened, there was no time to go into the forest or find the sacred place or say the sacred prayer. All they had to do was gather together and tell one another the story. And even with that, the people were spared. And that's a traditional story told by the Hebrew people. I think it's a beautiful story. There are lots of stories in many cultures that tell about wisdom. There's a story, another story that comes from the Buddhist tradition. It seems that two monks were going back to their temple. They had been on a long journey, and they were going along in silence, the way monks are to do. And when they came to a river, and standing by the river, there was a young woman with a huge basket of laundry, and she said to the monks, "Sirs, the water is so swift, I can't cross. Can you help me?" And one of the monks took the young woman, put her on his shoulders, waded her across that river. When they got to the other side, he put her down. She went on her way, and he and his brother walked in the opposite direction on their way to the temple to finish their journey. And as they walked along, 2 hours went by, and at the end of 2 hours, the one brother who had not helped turned to the one who had, and he just burst out in anger. He said, "I saw what you did. I saw what you did. You know our rules. You know about talking. You know our vows. You know about women. You know all of this, yet you did what you did. I'm ashamed. And he went on into this tirade, and when he was halfway through, the brother who had waded the young girl across the stream said, "Oh, my brother." He said, "I waded her across the stream. I carried her across the stream. I put her down 2 hours ago. You're still carrying her around." Did you ever do that? Just hold on to that problem forever and ever? I need to know, we promised not to go very long. I think I'm going to tell a couple little ghosts. I'll tell one good little star story, and then I'm going to tell, we'll end up with a ghost story. How's that? Ghost stories are great. Now the rule is that when I tell your kids, when I teach them a ghost story, I say, this is the rule. You can tell a scary story, but you can never really scare anybody because that's unkind. We won't do that. But you can sort of scare them a little bit. Let me tell you a star story that comes from the Shawnee people. They live now, many of the Shawnee are in Oklahoma. This is a very beautiful story. If you go out in the summertime and look up in the sky, you will see a little group of stars. The Greeks called them corona. And in the Greek legend, that's supposed to be the crown. Bacchus, who was trying to persuade a young lady, and nothing else, the Valentines and the cards and the candy and the roses didn't seem to work. So he said, "Oh, I will let you know of my true intentions." And he threw his crown up into the sky. And that's one of the stories of how that group of stars. You look at them, and they're almost a circle. If there was just one more star in here, you would see almost a circle. Kind of a lopsided circle. But that's not what the Shawnee Indians say happened. They say this, that one night a young chieftain was walking in the forest, and he came to a clearing, and he looked up in the sky, and he saw that the night was black, and he saw that the stars were sparkling and beautiful, and he thought, this will be a night of magic of some kind. And while he was there looking up at all the stars, one of the stars began to grow in brightness. It got brighter and brighter, and then he could see that the reason that the star was getting bright is because the star was coming down, getting closer and closer. And then he could see that it wasn't a star at all. What was coming down out of the sky was a basket. And when that basket, a glowing basket made of starlight and moonbeams, not out of willow, the kinds of baskets he knew about, that basket came all the way down, and then there stepped from that basket a beautiful girl. When she was free, out stepped another, and then another, one after the other, each more beautiful than the other, and the last girl to step out was the loveliest of all. As soon as they were all out of the basket, they all began to do a dance, a round circle dance, all night long. He watched them dance. Morning came, they all got into the basket, and the basket flew up into the sky. Well, he went back to his village, and he wondered all day, Am I having a dream? Was that a dream? What happened? So he decided to go back to that same place the next night to see what would happen. The next night, the same thing happened. A basket came down out of the sky. The girls got out and began to dance, but Algon had magic powers, and this night, he changed himself into a small mouse so that he could get up close and see those girls dance. And he watched them, and each time that one girl would come by, his heart would beat just a little bit faster. Morning came, they went into the sky. Third night, the same thing. He watched the basket come down, he watched them get out, dance. He turned himself into a mouse, and he watched them dance by. But that third night, when she danced by, one time when she came by, he could bear it no longer, and he quickly changed himself back into a young man, and he held on tight to her. Her sisters were frightened. They got into the basket. They went back into the sky, and he held her. And he took her to his village. But in fact, Algon was kind, and in time, Algon and the Star Maiden, for that's what the people in the village called her, Algon and the Star Maiden were married, and in time they had a boy, and everyone called this child the Star Boy. Now one day, Algon came home, and he found that the Star Maid was with sadness. And when he said, "What is wrong? Why do you weep?" She said, "Oh, I need to go back to the sky." She said, "I'm of the sky people, and I miss my sisters and brothers, and I long for the sky. I want to see my mother and father. I do not belong on the earth." Algon wanted her to be happy, and he used his magic powers, and he and the Star Maid and the Star Boy all went into the sky, and when they did, they took gifts. They took gifts from every animal that lived, and took a gift from that animal and gave to every star in the sky, so that even today, every star in the sky has a brother animal on this earth. They lived in the sky for a while, but once she saw that his face was sad. And when she saw that, she said, "Why are you sad?" He said, "I belong on the earth. I miss the rivers and the streams. I long to see mountains." Now, how could they solve this problem? She wanted to live in the sky. He wanted to live on the earth. Algon used his magic powers one last time, and he changed himself and the Star Maid and the Star Boy all into white hawks. And now they live between the two worlds, flying up to the sky when they wish, coming to the earth when they wish. And if you are ever anywhere and you see a white hawk, you will know that it is Algon or the Star Girl, the Star Maid, or the Star Boy. But as for those stars, in the summertime, you can go out and you can see them, and they are dancing once again in the sky, and they save a place for her. They hope that one day she will come back and dance with him. And perhaps she will. But each night in the summer, at least when I have seen them in the sky, the place is still empty. But next summer, find that group of stars and watch, because perhaps she will come, and you will see that last star making a circle. And that's the end of the story. Well, the kids always want to hear a scary story, so I'm going to tell, I'll finish it off. You ready? I don't want to hear a sound. Not a sound. Come on up here. They're so funny. And the little girls are the worst. They cling and hang on. Do you have any questions while they're kind of getting settled? Can I answer any questions about storytelling? Just sit down right in here. If you as adults have never spent an evening listening, see, storytelling was never intended for children. Storytelling traditionally is adults telling to adults. The Irish call it the time of the coming in. And the adults sit around and tell stories, and they pass on the tales of the ancient Ireland and the myths and the time of the Druids and the time when the Christians first came. I mean, it's wonderful. The stories are told by adults to adults. When Carnegie started building libraries all over the United States back around the turn of the century, they started building these libraries. Teachers and librarians wanted opportunities to bring children in and have them start using books and using libraries, and the idea of story hours started. And though there were a few of what are called the little household stories, or what the Navajo people call the little stories, or what many of the Indians call just the little teaching tales, you have a few of those. Most of the really profound tales are told by adults to adults, and you should tell them over and over and over. Just like when the kids bring you books and say, read it over and over and over, and you think, oh God, what am I going to hear? When am I going to get a new book? But tell those stories, and they want to hear stories. Tell about the time when I was born. Tell about the time, if they're adopted, what was it like the day I came to live with you? Tell about the time when I got sick and you took care of me. Tell about the time, and tell them. You know that. You know, we're adults, and I still say to my mother, well, what, tell me about the time. Now, how old was I when this happened, And I get to hear some family stories. We were real Okies. And I can remember, I was 3 years old, and I thought it was a policeman. As I learned later on, it was a border guard. And he stuck his head in the car, and he said, just the 5 of you and the baby? And I was just 3, and I remember saying to him, I'm not a baby. You remember when they did? And I remember that story. Coming, I'm not a baby. And it was not till about a year or so ago I said to my mother, we didn't have a car. How did we get out to California in 1938 without a car? She said, oh, well, people would advertise and you would ride out. Now get a picture of this. I said, who's in the car? She said, well, she and my father, me, 3 years old. The three of my mother and my father and I sat in the front seat. This is with strangers. There were 2 women in the back seat. She said they were so huge they took up the whole back seat. Can you imagine driving from Oklahoma City on Route 66, not I-40, with a 3-year-old, 3 adults in the front seat with a 3-year-old in your lap? Dear God. I said, how did you do that? She said, oh, you were a good little girl. You stood and just looked out the window the whole time. And I thought, good little girl or not, I just can't imagine. I mean, you can't even go for an afternoon over to somebody's house without saying, are we there yet? Is this the place, or is this the city? God, my kids, is this the country? I'd say, look out the window. Okay, you ready for the story? Not a sound. Parents, this is a West Texas version of a story that you have either heard this story, or you've heard one like it, or you've heard a version of this story. Well, it seems that once upon a time, way, way out in West Texas, way out all by himself, there was a little boy, lived all alone on a farm, all alone, except there was an old man and an old woman lived with him. And every day, that little boy had to go out and work in the garden, and he didn't like working in that garden because it was a vegetable garden, and he didn't like vegetables. But the old woman would make him go out there and she'd make him chop, and she'd make him pull weeds so they'd have good vegetables, and he didn't even like them. And he was out there this one day, and he was chopping, and he was pulling weeds, and he was hoeing, and he was mad. He was thinking to himself, all we ever eat is vegetables. He says, we have vegetables for breakfast, and we have vegetables for lunch, and we eat vegetables for dinner, and vegetables for after school snacks. He said, I'm tired of eating vegetables, and he'd chop a little more and pull a few more weeds. He said, what I'd like is some meat. And what he decided he'd like was maybe a great big platter full of fried chicken. And he'd think about that fried chicken, but he says, do we ever eat fried chicken? No, because all we ever eat are vegetables. We have broccoli for breakfast. And we have rhubarb for lunch. And he got to thinking maybe he wouldn't like chicken. Maybe he'd like a big, thick slice of ham with some red-eye gravy. But we didn't get to eat ham because we always eat vegetables, and he'd pull some weeds. He'd think about roast beef. He'd think about a big, thick steak. He'd think about everything that you could have that was meat. But all he was doing was chopping and chopping, and he was chopping with his hoe, and in one moment he heard a sound, "Oh!" And he looked down on the ground. And burrowing away underneath the ground, he couldn't see what it was. He could just see that the earth was rising up. Something had gone off, quickly disappearing. And then he looked down, and he knew what that thing was yelling about. He had accidentally cut off that creature's big toe. And he reached down and he got that big toe and he held it up and he looked at that thing, and it was covered in mud, and there were veins, and there was blood dripping down there, and all of that. And he looked at that thing, and he looked at that toe, and he looked back in it, and then he thought, meat. Told you I was going to gross you out. So that boy went down to the river, and he washed off that big toe. And he went back up to the house where the old woman was cooking vegetables, and he took that toe, took the lid off that pot, threw that toe in there, and he went back and he just pulled those weeds, and he worked in the garden all that afternoon, just singing and humming away. And that night, when it was supper time, he was the first to get his plate. He went over to that stove, took off that lid, fished around, found that toe, put it on his plate, walked back over, sat down at the table, took his fork, stuck it in that toe, held it up, and he peeled off the toenail. That was good. He had had some meat at last, and he just had the best meal. And that night they cleared off all the supper dishes, and old man later on was kind of sitting in his rocking chair going, creak, 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 creak. Old lady was sitting in the other chair, and she was kind of just knitting away, and you could hear her knitting needles going click, 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 click. And the boy was sitting there just kind of poking in the fire, poking in the fire. And strangely enough, that night a storm came up, and the wind began to howl. And then they heard something, but it was not the wind. Way in the distance, they could hear a sound. And they all listened. And the old man started rocking just a little bit faster, and the old lady listened, and she was starting to knit just a little bit faster, and old boy was listening, a little boy, and he could hear that sound. They heard it again, and this time it was closer. The old man started going crickety, 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 crick. The old lady started going clickety, click, clickety, click, clickety, click. Boy was poking in the fire, poking in the fire. They listened and they listened. They heard it again, and this time it was out by the gate, and they could hear what it was saying. Where's my big toe? That old man started going crickety, 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 crickety. The old lady was going like this, and the boy was just poking in the fire. They heard it again. It was inside the yard. Where's my big toe? That old man jumped up. He ran over. He got in one of the beds. He covered all up, and he was just shaking and shaking underneath the covers. And the old lady was going clickety, 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 and the boy couldn't even move. And then it was up on the porch. Where's my big toe? That old lady got up. She ran, got in the other bed, pulled all the covers up over her head. That boy didn't move. And then they could hear it going up the side of the house. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, all up. And then they could hear it walking around on the roof of the house. Step, drag. I can't do it. Step, drag, step, drag. And then pretty soon they could hear it scritching around up there at the top of the chimney, and it started coming down the steps, down that chimney, scritching, scratching, scritching. And soon enough, the boy who could not move saw that creature. It was right in front of him. It was even in the fire, but it wasn't burning. And he looked down and he could see that that creature's toe was missing, and his toe was all kind of glovelled over and horrible looking. And once again that creature said, "Where's my big toe?" "You've got it!" Well, I like to think I promise you, parents, every story that I have told to this time has had a real moral or a meaning to it, but this one and a couple of the other ghost stories, no redeeming social value. They're just there for fun. They're just there to scare you. That's called a jump tale. And you've heard some version of that at some point in your life, at some family reunion when your cousin was going to tell it. I do, again, really thank you for letting me come to your school. We've been doing a lot of writing. Your kids have been doing a lot of very imaginative things. It's like this huge celebration. So tomorrow, what time does that celebration start tomorrow? In the afternoon? 1 o'clock. You are really invited to come up and see what's going on. It's going to be party time and learning time here tomorrow at 1. It's going to be wonderful. And so we really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming out. Tell stories and have a storytelling festival sometime here in this community. I know you've got local storytellers. I know you've got stories that are here that should be celebrated and passed on, and that give us roots. And we've got some of the books here that have been provided by, tell me the name of your bookstore, Fact and Fiction Bookstores. I didn't tell either of those stories, but we've been doing them this week, and would like for you to, we have some of the tapes for sale. But if you don't do my stories, do your own. Tell stories. Thank you for coming out.